Welcome to this special roundtable conversation to mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I'm Dave Brown. I'll introduce you to the panel in just a second. I will mention this is a figurative roundtable. The gang is actually sitting on a sofa. No roundtable to be seen here. But this is all about marking the UN International Day of the Persons with Disabilities. It's an opportunity to both celebrate the Declaration of the Rights of People with Disabilities and reflect on the year that's been. I'm Dave Brown. I host the television show Game Changers on AMI-télé, joined by Brock Richardson, the host of the Neutral Zone podcast and other media spaces. Ramya Amuthan is the host of Reflections on AMI Audio, and Ramya and I have done quite a bit of media together over the years. Also joining the conversation is Joe Fornasier, and he is a content creator and featured in Got Game Season 2 on AMI-télé, and over on the far end, Lil Gabi D of Got Game Season 1, Squeaky Wheel, and Fashion Dis, also an influencer and content creator. A big welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Ramya, big general question to get things going on. What are your overall thoughts on how members of the community are represented in the Canadian media industry?
Well, first of all, the current state, I'd say, is better than before, better than we wanted. And I'd say for me personally, because I'm living, breathing media every single day working for AMI, I'd say that there's still a lot going on underneath. So the conversations are happening, the exposure is happening, and we're trying. We're doing better, and so it is getting better.
I think better is a nice note to strike there, because there's been improvements, although it's easy to get improvement when things were so far in the gutter to begin with. So, but hey, better's good. We take the victories where you can find them. Joe, what do you think? What are your overall thoughts on how disability is represented in the Canadian media space?
Yeah, again, I want to echo what you said. Better is definitely the key word, because definitely 10 years ago, when I kind of really first started getting into media, there was pretty much zero. And now every day you kind of look around, and I don't look at too well, but when I try to look around, there's always a little piece of media with disability kind of sprinkled everywhere, but you kind of want to see that more and more as time goes on, but it's definitely getting better for sure.
Yeah, you see more people in prominent places, whether it's in fiction or nonfiction. You see it more in news stories, people being used as thought leaders and not just sort of characters or jumping off points in stories. There's definitely improvement in the overall operation. Let's stick with the notion of positivity here for a moment. Looking over to Gabi for this one. What are some of the positive lived experiences that you've had working in the Canadian media industry?
I think when it comes to positive experiences, I find the most of them when working on shows about people with disabilities. So thankfully, on the AMI channel, there's so many different shows. And I think my most positive experience was working on the show Got Game, because not only was it a show centered around people with disabilities, but also it was a lot of youth. So I got to meet other people from who had different lived experiences that I got to learn from as well.
Part of that is the next generation component, right? It's really neat for someone like myself, who I call an elder millennial, that I was once that next generation, and now there's more people coming up, new voices in the Gen Z and even the Gen Alphas coming up. It's really cool when you get to interact and hear about their experiences, both on and off the camera, right, Gabi?
Definitely, and as a person with a disability, you hear and live your own experience all the time, so sometimes you don't get that opportunity to learn about others. So being able to chat with somebody and kind of go deep into their best days and their worst days and learn about other disabilities is always a blessing.
Brock, what about you? Some positive experiences working in the media industry?
I think when I started this journey 15 years ago, which is crazy to come out of my mouth that it's been 15 years, but it was one of those situations where it's like, where will I fit? And I think I working with AMI as long as I have, you find that place, but I've also broadened that beyond that. I've gotten the opportunity to work on staff with Family Feud Canada, and that was a real rewarding experience, because I got to be that person that sort of opened the eyes of people around me. I was the only one with a physical disability on staff, and so it was like, oh, I was the representation, which now, when we see people in the audience with a physical disability, they can relate to. Family Feud has somebody on staff with a disability, and I really appreciated being able to sort of open the door to that.
Okay, so there's been positivity, there's been collective positivity. Let's tap into some of the negative, because sometimes it's okay to talk a little bit of junk here. This is real talk. This is authentic talk in this space, at this round table, without a table. Ramya, negative experiences working in the industry.
Yeah, definitely a lot of challenges have come my way, or things that I've had to sit with and think, okay, how do I make it through this and still represent myself well? Because I feel that to the core, that we want to be authentic through our experiences, wherever we're working, wherever we are in life. And I feel like that's the goal. And sometimes that's just not it. You know, you get hired for something to authentically represent the disabled experience, or the lived experience of disability, but it's not really at the core. You know, it's just on paper, but it's not necessarily resonating through the process. And that's been a challenge. For example, I got hired as a consultant for a film, and they wanted to make sure that the film was not accessible, but representing disability well, because there was blindness in the messaging. But I wasn't asked once, you know, what that's supposed to look like, what that feels like as I'm there for the shoot. I was there for a 2-day, 14 hours a day shoot, but I just felt like I was sitting there as the token consultant. But I have no idea, like, leaving that film, what they took out of me, what they took out of my lived experience, or what I contributed. And that felt really, really crappy. I didn't enjoy that experience. I didn't know how to follow up with it. I didn't know what my report was going to be. I was like, what am I getting paid for here? And that didn't feel authentic at all. So experiences like this do come, and to be honest, you know, part of that experience for me, the negativity, was that I didn't feel I did my best leaving it.
If I read between the lines there, did it almost feel perhaps a little bit like a tokenistic inclusion?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which feels especially bizarre behind the scenes on something.
Exactly. Yeah, you're just sitting there going, and where's the disability representation? Oh, it's supposed to be me, but I'm not actually doing it. Yeah.
Joe, what about you? Some negative experiences or perceptions about the media industry still?
Yeah, I think when I was in university, kind of trying to get into media, I was kind of sold this idea that this is the time, like this is the perfect time to be in media because everyone's looking for that disability representation. And when I actually tried to get a job, I emailed, no exaggeration, hundreds of media companies trying to get hired, and none of them even got back to me one time. And that's kind of where I started my social media career, is because I thought, like, no one really wants to take a chance on me because it's a little bit taboo right now. No one's really had, like, a big sports company had someone with a disability, a blind person, talking for their show. So I had to create my own lane, and that's kind of where everything started. I wasn't always supposed to be like that. I think everything kind of happens for a reason, but it was super frustrating at the start that everyone said, this is the time for disability. And then once you actually get out there in the real world, it's just a thing people say. And good thing we have places like AMI and companies that do accept that, but it's not what it's all seemed to be.
Yeah, the words are simple, right? Oh, there's going to be opportunities. This is an inclusive workplace or an inclusive opportunity, but then you get there and the wall is still very firm. You can't bust through that wall. One of the thoughts that I've had over the years working in the media industry is that it still feels like you're perhaps teaching producers or executive producers or directors about the real raw basics of disability. So you almost never necessarily get to what I'd call the disability 202 or disability 303, the advanced level discourse that perhaps the community wants to hear, because you keep just getting stuck doing the basics, the 101, and you never necessarily get the opportunity to advance the conversation. And that just has to do with a lot of higher ups in the industry still not necessarily having the true awareness or education or understanding of what's actually going on. And you just have to keep explaining yourself over and over and over again. Gabi, I want to give you an opportunity to lob a couple of grenades here as well. What are some of your experiences in terms of maybe the negatives or where there's room for improvement in the way that you've been exposed to the Canadian media industry?
I think the Canadian media industry in general needs to have more, for improvement-wise, needs to have more people with disabilities on screen all the time. You see somebody with a disability around every corner, so why isn't our media like that? There's no excuse for a show to not have somebody with a disability in it, because if you're, especially with sitcoms or kind of coming of age, day in the life type of shows, in those lives you're going to see people with disabilities, so why aren't they already prominent, if not a guest character, which should be on all the time, so more so main character, on these shows as it is. I would love to see more people with disabilities in all Canadian media.
Yeah, we're willing to settle for some cameos here and there and some guest appearances, but there better be follow-ups. This better turn into a recurring cameo pretty fast.
Yes, I want a full character arc. Why am I here? What's my problem? Help me solve it.
Yeah, make me part of the story. Make me
Yes.
part of the story, darn it. I want to see myself as part of the story and not just something that's a little bit of a throwaway. Brock, as I come over to you to give you an opportunity to perhaps sound off here on some of the negatives in the space and where there's room for improvements.
Yeah, I think having to work a lot with the public in the Canadian media industry, at least right now, I'm learning how to navigate people who automatically want to go to the able-bodied person, even though I'm the frontline guy sitting behind the desk and arguably know the rules and the ropes as good as anyone would, but immediately you want to turn to the able-bodied person and go, I have this question, and then the able-bodied person has to go, I actually don't have the answer, which is the greatest feeling for me of all, because the able-bodied person doesn't have the answer, and it's like, you need it from me, even though I look different than he or she, but guess what? I have the answer, they don't.
Yeah, that's such a commonality of the disability experience. Someone sort of talking over you or talking away from you or just assuming because you're different. Yeah. You don't have the answers, you don't have the information, you don't have the capacity.
No, and it's very satisfying when you actually do have the answer and they don't.
You know, talking about improvements, guys, where the good is. In my case, my disability as a person with albinism, I have a lot of light sensitivity. And in television, there's a whole lot of lights. And I've got to give the production crew that I'm working with on my show, Game Changers, a ton of credit over the course of this season. They have been going into the lab trying to figure out ways to do great lighting that goes easier on my eyes. And I've got to say that speaks to the openness of some people in the industry willing to completely try doing something different for the sake of the comfort and inclusion of talent. And Ramya, those are those little things that really make a difference when you feel like maybe you haven't been butting your head up against that rock anymore and the rock is now busted open and people are learning new inventive ways to make television. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's the culture of care, right? And I think that's a very broad statement, but when you feel it. You know when you feel that on a team or in a particular work circumstance or on transit or wherever, when people care, when people will take the time or try to understand your situation. And I'm not saying I'm like the easiest person to run into all the time because I get frustrated as well. And sometimes that's, unfortunate for the stranger on the street that has to deal with me that day. But it's true that there are lots of opportunities for us to just say, oh, okay, this is what disability is. And let's try to work with it. And the more and more we can kind of do that with each other, the better it feels for everybody.
Joe, I like that Ramya is mentioning culture of care. I was maybe digging into innovation there a little bit. You're someone who's carved your own pathway, right? In the social media space, saying, I'm just gonna create my own brand. How does it feel being someone who's so deeply in control of your message and knowing that you get to innovate in emerging spaces?
I think it's super liberating. Especially growing up, and I used to have sight and lost my sight when I was 10. I was a big hockey player. And I didn't even know about blind hockey. I had no kind of role models, no one to look up to, no one to teach me about disability and disability in sport, which is kind of my niche. So I think the biggest thing for me is having people talk to me about, I never heard about blind hockey, I lost my sight, and say things to me about that. And I get to control every piece of content, every narrative I push, and no one can stop me. So it's a lot of power, but I think it's been absolutely amazing to kind of teach that younger generation, as we were talking about earlier.
Gabi, you also are quite prominent in the social media, digital creation spaces. So sort of similar question to Joe. You have been able to carve your own path. What does it mean to you to feel like perhaps you're controlling your direction on your journey through the media industry?
It's a blessing because I think, as Joe mentioned, a lot of people, they're just unfamiliar with things. You mentioned blind hockey. With me having dwarfism, a lot of people are unaware of correct terms, incorrect terms, and just the life of a little person because they weren't taught that. So being able to create content that provides those answers and can inform people, and also at least in this moment of time, when there are situations where there isn't enough people with disabilities in media, being our own media, being able to put that out ourselves is always something that I think is really good, and it's almost a stepping stone until times can change.
You know, Brock, there's also, in your story of hosting the podcast, The Neutral Zone, that's digital media. You've also been working hard to carve your own space, and that's been, what, almost a decade now you've been working on The Neutral Zone?
Yep, decade this past June that we've been doing, and it really is just carving your own path and saying, this is why this brand is necessary. And I've always grown up with if you don't carve your path, nobody's gonna carve it for you. And I think that people don't realize how difficult, but at the same time how rewarding it can be to carve your own path and arguably be successful in doing that.
Yeah, it's self-determination, right? In a lot of cases, when you're a person with a disability trying to break into the media space, so many times the answer is go to the small market, do the small thing, except for various reasons with our various disabilities, it's hard to walk away from your support networks. I can't go to some small Canadian town where there's no public transportation and do a radio show, so you have to cut your chops in different ways, and you've got to carve your space, you've got to be self-deterministic. It's a really, really important part of the disability media story to know that self-determination is sometimes thrust upon us, but it can yield some really amazing, really, really amazing dividends. Hey, Gabi, as you're thinking about how the industry can improve, what comes to mind?
I think the industry really needs to improve upon accessible sets. So if you want people within your media, great. People with disabilities, even better. But if you're inviting me to be on a set, make sure that you have my accessible needs met. You know, if I'm a person in a wheelchair, is there a ramp available? Is there a lift available? Is there an elevator? Is there lowered countertops, you know? As a little person, do you have stools available? Am I going to have to reach something that's on a shelf that's way too high? So having an accessible set is, first off, you should have it anyway, whether you have a person with a disability on set or not, because everybody has a little bit of disability in them, whether now or when they get to an older age. But an accessible set is necessary for all media and all sets.
Good take. We like that. It's a good take. All right, guys, I think we can all agree that it's important to recognize people with disability and their talent in the industry. I think we're not going to have a fight about that across this round table that doesn't exist, across this triangular sofa. But Brock, if I were to say, how would you describe that importance? Take it a step deeper about recognizing the talent of people with disabilities in the industry.
You have to be open as a person who's running something, and it can be as simple as, how can I make this experience for you successful? How can I make this experience for you work? And it's as simple as opening the door and saying, I want to be of help. If you can't do that, you're really in trouble, because you're never going to get to the understanding that what I need and you vice versa. But it starts with a simple, how can I help?
Gabi, what do you think? The importance is clear, but how would you describe the importance?
I think the importance is almost a necessity. With having people of disabilities all around, it is a necessity to have people with disabilities in media, behind the scenes in media, and all around media, because that is, if you're going to depict real life, that is real life.
Joe, how would you describe the importance of recognizing the talent and celebrating the talent of people with disabilities in the industry?
Yeah, I absolutely love necessity. I think that's such a great word. I think it's just huge. It's just huge. I never really realized how little representation there was until I was on the inside looking out. Because you don't really see a whole lot of blind people, and then that's just my disability in media. And I mean, there's a lot of blind people in the world. It's not like they're all bad actors, not funny. I mean, some of us are, but not all of us. There's great people. I just don't think they get that representation. And it really hit me when I started posting online. I was getting a lot of hate comments, people saying that I was faking my blindness because my eyes didn't glaze over and that I grabbed something with my hand. They said, "You're not blind. Like, why are you lying about this?" It's like, yeah, I just didn't get my driver's license on purpose because I thought I'd fake it for some views. But it really opened my eyes. Like, this is crazy. And these people, I don't blame them. They have no idea because no one has taught them. I think it's huge to teach people. And if it's in the form of media and a TV show, it's a lot easier to digest, what disability really is. So that's why I think it's just so important.
Ramya, you get to the last whack at this. How would you describe the importance of recognizing people with disabilities and their talent in the industry?
Yeah, what I really want to give you is a spiel on responsibility and how we ought to be responsible and have representation of disability in media. But really my honest answer is, Dave, like that's the direction we're headed in. We want to have full stories. We want to have full products with people's stories, the actual realities. It's in the fabric of Canada, at least. You know, here we really appreciate that. We respect getting to know people on an inside-out basis. And the only way to get that done is to get the representation in from the ground up, whether it be a person with a disability in the consultation phase, some people with disabilities in writing or editing, or mixing and mastering your product, or, giving you their understanding of a product and telling you like, yeah, this works or this doesn't. And this is everything from infrastructure to media content. So, why wouldn't we? Like, of course we have to have people with disabilities as part of the process.
Yeah, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this conversation today, is that as this industry evolves, it's show, don't tell. Put words in action. Stop talking about representation and start doing representation. Give the platforms and give people with disabilities the opportunity to share their true selves and their true stories, for the goods and the bads and everywhere in between. It's enough tell time. Stop telling people about people with disabilities and start showing them people with disabilities. And that's going to be a big difference.
I want to add something.
What do you got?
The whole thing about adding people with disabilities to films or to media is amazing. But when we do so, we need to make sure they have full stories and it's not a sob story. We can touch on the hard times, we could touch on the trials and tribulations, but that cannot be the end-all be-all. We have to show the happy times, the sad times. We have to show that people with disabilities are just like everybody else. We can have a happy-go-lucky, amazing life. We don't need to be the sad violin story. So I think that's something that when it comes to Canadian media, we also need to interject.
Yeah, you can show me walking into something, but please also show people the smart thing that I said before I walked into the wall. Give me a more fulsome
Calling
character.
us out here.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you for this. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If something from this conversation struck a chord with you, please drop a comment down below.